Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of the Rotoworld Basketball Show. I'm Raphielle Johnson, joined as always by Noah Rubin. We're without Dan Titus at Yahoo Sports this week. He had a prior engagement come up, so he will not be with us today. But there's still plenty of us to work through. Noah, busy week in the basketball world. Monday was wild in the NBA, and then obviously tomorrow starts what should probably be a national holiday for many of us, the actual 64 team bracket, the first four last night and tonight. But any thoughts from what we saw on Monday from a fantasy standpoint, or even Tuesday too?
Yeah, I think first of all, I think everybody is kind of feeling the effects of load management
Yeah.
and rest nights and teams tanking. Like we even have Dan out tonight or today for load management just to give him a little rest day here. But Tuesday was a little bit of a lighter night.
Yeah.
A couple fun performances on Monday, specifically. Man, Quentin Grimes, he has been so much fun to see him kind of emerge here for the tanking Sixers slash the just incredibly unhealthy Sixers. So seeing him get to kind of shine, give them a little bit of a sense of optimism heading into next season. If they're able to be healthy. I know I'm saying positive things about the Sixers when Dan isn't even here, but like if you have this lineup of that's assuming everybody's healthy, Maxey, McCain, Paul George, Joel Embiid, you have Quentin Grimes. I feel like I'm missing someone. Am I missing
Kelly
someone? Yeah. Oh no, the person I'm
Jared
missing is a
McCain.
potential or a top 6 pick. That's
Okay.
the other
Yeah,
thing I'm
that's
thinking
true.
of. So it's like they have something to be really excited about for next season, even if it's been absolutely devastating this year.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Sixers while wearing a Thunder hat because they play tonight. And if anyone has seen the Thunder injury report, they've pulled just about everyone. Obviously, Jalen Williams, J-Dub was already out. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander will not be playing. I think Chet Holmgren is off the injury report, but they've got Hartenstein on there. So it's going to be funny. Like Philly's pick is top 6 protected. Anything below that, it goes to Oklahoma City. So feels like Sam Presti may be playing a little mind games with them ahead of that game tonight. But yeah, in terms of major injuries, we had a huge one happen on Monday. 2 actually. We'll start in Sacramento first. Domantas Sabonis sprained right ankle. He's out at least 10 days. Jonas Valanciunas, we know he's going to be the fill-in. He's already rostered in most leagues. My question to you, is there anyone else who could potentially be targeted in Sacramento during fantasy playoff time?
I think we have to consider but not feel good about Jake LaRavia and Trey Lyles. I think just simply off the fact that they're going to have to play extra minutes, especially with some of these matchups. Like Valanciunas is a good matchup for some teams, and other times having like a non-mobile big, just he can get played off the court at times. So that makes Lyles and LaRavia a little bit more valuable to them as a team. But I really don't feel confident rostering either. I think this is what's kind of made some of these injuries so frustrating. And I think we'll kind of run into the same issue with the next one we're going to talk about, is that it's not like we're having somebody that's going to come in, fill those minutes, and be a really good fantasy option. It's just a couple like really frustrating situations that you're just having to look elsewhere, and there's not really a good fill in.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. In the past, we've seen Keon Ellis pick up more minutes off the bench. He doesn't play the same position, obviously. So if you're looking for similar production, or at least production in similar categories, you're not going to get it there. But maybe he gets to a point where he's consistently playing about 30 minutes a night while they're without Sabonis here. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't really see too many appealing options in Sacramento with Sabonis out. Minimum of 10 days, maybe even longer. So for those who have him rostered, he may not be able to help you out, in your final fantasy playoff round. So I think, yeah, like Noah said, you're probably going to want to look elsewhere to other teams, see if there are any options available, because not too much appeal in Sacramento. You mentioned this other one you alluded to, Trey Murphy in New Orleans, torn labrum. He is done for the season. Terrible end of what was an excellent year for him. I think him stepping up is probably a huge factor in him finally parting ways with Brandon Ingram. That probably was going to happen anyway, but maybe more initiative on their part to get that done. So where are you looking on that roster, and is Jordan Hawkins a viable option?
I think, again, like you're probably looking at other teams. I think Jordan Hawkins should see more minutes. And he is a capable shooter. He's capable of getting hot. He just hasn't done that consistently this year. I think if you're just looking to fill in games or you're just like looking for opportunity, like it's there for him. I just don't feel confident. Jose Alvarado is another guy there that should see extra minutes. Maybe they go with moving CJ McCollum more to an off-ball role in the starting lineup with Alvarado next to him and be a little bit more confident in Alvarado getting like assists and steals than I do with Jordan Hawkins being a consistent scoring threat. But this is just another situation where I'm probably just looking at other teams and other streaming options just because I don't feel confident.
Yeah, I feel better about him if we saw him provide value in other categories, in other like points and 3-pointers when the shots aren't falling, but it really hasn't happened. He'll certainly have his opportunities, like you say, but if anything, you're probably going to look at Jose Alvarado, expect him to play more minutes. And then after that, the pickings are slim in New Orleans at this point, and then who knows if they get to a point where they decide to sit guys like CJ McCollum and Zion Williamson. That could make the task even more challenging because those guys are going to have to play, but what are you giving up from an efficiency standpoint in exchange for those extra minutes? All right. Another player's done for the season. I got to go to the negative for Philadelphia this time. It's Paul George. He received multiple injections, I think, early this week, and he has been deemed medically unfit to play. So I guess they're trying to avoid a potential fine from the NBA with that verbiage. But we already mentioned Quentin Grimes. Their injury report is an absolute mess right now. So what are fantasy managers to think at this point?
I think you have a lot of different dart throw options on that roster.
Yeah.
The one I feel best about is Jared Butler. And then Justin Edwards and O'Shea Brissett are probably the other guys I'm really looking at. Like all of them played a ton of minutes in the last game. A couple other guys were productive, but the minutes weren't necessarily there. I just feel like these guys will be the most consistent when it comes to production. Jared Butler is probably the guy I like the most. Points and assists are like he has been giving those out consistently. But man, this is this is the definition of silly season right here. Like these are the guys.
That's what kind of stinks about the NBA schedule because you'd love to be able to end like your fantasy seasons earlier, but the All-Star break is at such a point where you can't really do that. So this is kind of what we all get stuck with. I throw Jeff Doughton Jr. into the mix too, but the issue with him, I think he's coming up to his 50 games available limit pretty soon here as a two-way guy. So I think I would give Jared Butler the edge over him for that reason because Butler's going to have more games available to play here. And he should be fine for the rest of the season. So I think Adem Bona, if he were healthy, he's someone else that would have really good value. I wouldn't say really good value, but for that roster, you'd be someone worth a roll of the dice there. But yeah, you just kind of wonder with some of these teams, are they just going to pull someone off the street and give them a uniform one night or, what's going to happen? Because it's tough if you're in fantasy leagues and you're trying to figure out who to potentially target here. You really can't do that.
Yeah. So it's hard to say like, yeah, I feel really, really good about this guy, but I feel better about Jared Butler than the rest, but I don't feel super, super confident. But that's what happens during silly season. It's a lot of guys we don't expect to play well but it doesn't always come consistently.
All right. It's probably be an easier conversation. LeBron James found out he'll be out for at least another week as he recovers from the groin injury. He had his first on-court workout on Sunday before their win over the Suns. Dorian Finney-Smith returned to the lineup. I think he was in injury management situation over the weekend. He's back. What are we thinking here? I've seen some good things out of Dalton Connect, but I don't know if I can fully trust him from a fantasy standpoint at this stage.
Yeah, I think my favorite option with the Lakers right now is Jordan Goodwin. Who started the last 3 games for them. Just in this last one, 15 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 steals, a block, 3 threes, shot efficiently, no turnovers. JJ Redick had kind of raved about him a few games ago and saying, doesn't always show up in the box score, but man, Jordan Goodwin was awesome for us tonight. Last 5 games or so, it's kind of been either really good production or next to nothing production, but he's been playing well and filling in that starting role, playing a ton of minutes. I think I mean, if
Mhm.
LeBron's missing a couple more games, I feel pretty good about Jordan Goodwin.
Yeah, I think that's a good call right there. Given how he's not going to give you like elite offensive production, but what he can do for you defensively is something that can be really valuable in category leagues at this point in the season. So if he's available in your league, he's definitely worth a dart throw. And the Lakers, let's see here. They've got 3 more games starting with Denver on Wednesday, which is tonight. So Denver, Milwaukee Thursday, and then Chicago on Saturday. If they decide to sit some of those guys for either one of these games in this back-to-back here, I think Goodwin would probably be pretty safe from sitting. So maybe that raises its value a little bit over these next 2 games, especially. The New York Knicks, Jalen Brunson, Shams Charania of ESPN reported over the weekend, unlikely to return before late March or early April. Seeing Deuce McBride fill the void at the point, but I think my question would be, if you have Brunson rostered, are you stashing him or are you dropping him based on this report?
Would kind of depend on how my playoffs are going or like when they are. Like most of my leagues, the championship is this week. Obviously, I'm dropping him. But if it's like this is the first week of my playoffs because I do have a league like that, I probably would be just hanging on just in case because when he comes back, he's going to see a full workload. The Knicks aren't going to ease him back in. But I was going to actually ask you about New York's rotation because it seems like since Mikal Bridges apparently reportedly said that or told Tom Thibodeau, hey, you need to basically tone our minutes down. It seems like it's more of a balanced rotation. Like, do you think that that's actually the case? And is that enough for, say, a guy like a Landry Shamet to be worth considering in like a deeper format?
That's a good question. And I think if anything, Mitchell Robinson being able to play more minutes might have more to do with that than anything. Most recently he played 24 minutes against the Heat. A really good run in terms of the production. I think he had 10 points, 9 boards in that one. So I think if anything, if you're going to target anyone with like a deep league roster spot, I think it would be Mitchell Robinson. Landry Shamet can be a bit touch and go with his shot. But Mitch, you're going to get rebounds, pretty good field goal percentage. You don't really want him to go to the foul line, of course, but the rebounds, blocks, I think he can provide some value if he continues to play about 24 minutes per night. And we've seen him on the floor a little bit more with Karl Anthony Towns. I think in terms of net rating, they're like a plus 45 with those two together. Limited sample size, but that's kind of what they envisioned when they added Towns during the offseason. We get Mitch back healthy. Maybe you can play those two together just to help out defensively because you really don't want Cat involved in those pick and rolls as the defending big. And Mitch will help out a lot more there.
Definitely. I feel a lot more confident about the Knicks as a team. Just the fact that the rotation is getting a little deeper this early. I mean, Tom Thibodeau can run his Tom Thibodeau rotation when the playoffs come, but in the regular season, let's try and get these guys a little healthier.
That's definitely agree with that. We talked earlier about really screwy injury reports. Dallas, Anthony Davis has been sent to the G League to work towards a return to the court. I have my thoughts on this, but I'm certainly interested to hear yours first and foremost, including, does this do anything to how you view Najee Marshall for the rest of the season?
It doesn't. I think that they might be sending him down to the G League to get some work in, and he might be close enough to returning that he could. But I think this is probably more of a formality thing to me, showing the league, hey, we're trying to get these guys back healthy, but I don't actually expect it. The only way I expect Anthony Davis to play is if there's a week left from the regular season and they've somehow held on to that last play-in spot. But they've lost 3 in a row. They're only a game ahead of the Suns. I expect AD to be in the G League for a little bit, and then I'm assuming, barring something crazy happening, that the Suns are eventually going to pass in the standings, and then they're not going to be rushing to get AD back in the lineup just to rely on him to maybe sneak into the play-in tournament. It doesn't make sense. But I think it is a nice gesture to show the league that they're trying.
Yeah.
So overall, no, I'm not too concerned about it. Najee Marshall is going to play a ton rest of the season regardless. And I don't expect AD, Derek Lively, Daniel Gafford, whoever else is hurt on that team to play again this season.
Yeah. Just have flashbacks to that old CJ McCollum, I'm trying Jennifer exchange from years ago. That's a good point. I certainly agree with that. For me, it's about two things. Like, one, Dallas's salary cap situation is so messed up that they can't sign anybody. Like Moses Brown, they couldn't give another 10-day to. And he played well before they had to let him go. And then the other thing, we thought Phoenix would have already passed them by now.
Yeah.
and they're still
Maybe
behind them. So yeah, you never know at this point, but I think those things factor into it. In terms of tonight's game, Kai Jones and Jaden Harvey are both questionable. So you get two more bodies back into the rotation because Dallas really doesn't have the numbers right now. Yeah, I know. Those guys aren't really going to make a difference, but
Jaden Hardy will shoot the basketball, though. He will do it. It might not go in, but it might. He's gonna shoot it.
Yeah, Kai Jones did play well in his one game before he got hurt, but
it's a great thing.
Yeah, I think at this point you hold on to Najee Marshall. He's going to play a lot of minutes. You can even roll the dice on Spencer Dinwiddie at this point. He's not going to be great for category leagues.
That takes a lot for you to say that, right?
I know. Coming from me, but guys like him, even Max Christie, he's kind of tapered off the production recently, but he's another guy you're just kind of like, just go ahead and throw them into your lineups because they're healthy and they're available. My question would be, what happens with Klay Thompson? If they were to get passed up by the Suns, would they try to bring his minutes down at a certain stage? But we'll see what happens there. Putting together rosters this time of year, it can be both fun and infuriating depending on how much money you put down on your league. So, yeah. Good luck to you all on that. Now we move on to our Atlanta Hawks portion of the podcast, and we're going to talk good things about these guys. First up, Zaccharie Risacher. I know you mentioned him last week in terms of Rookie of the Year. He's been much improved, had a really good game last night in their blowout of the Hornets. What have you thought about his recent play, and then has it done anything to your thoughts of him in terms of dynasty value for future seasons?
Yeah, I'm really optimistic about what he has done recently. I was actually looking at some stats earlier and was texting them to some of my friends that are also Hawks fans. Let me pull this up while I say it. This season, he has averaged 11.9 points, 3.7 rebounds, 1.2 assists, 0.8 steals, half a block, 1.5 threes, 44.3% from the floor, 24.5 minutes. And then this other player as a rookie a while ago averaged incredibly similar numbers, like 1.7 threes, 12.5 points, like literally both shot 44.3% from the floor. You know who it is?
Stephon Castle, isn't it?
No, it's rookie Klay Thompson.
Really?
So the numbers there are incredibly similar. The only thing that's been like a good bit better for Klay than Risacher is he shot 41% from three as a rookie. Risacher shot 35%, but since the All-Star break, Risacher has been shot 44% from three, I think on almost 6 attempts per game. Like he was getting tall Klay Thompson comparisons before the draft, which is player comparisons are always interesting because it's not saying, yeah, this guy's going to be a surefire Hall of Famer, top 3 shooter of all time, but he's taller. But it's like the style of play of like, no, you aren't going to ask him to do a ton of shot creation, but a lot of catch and shoot shots. So I think he fits in really well with Atlanta. And when I was going through those stats earlier, I was like, wow, a lot of these numbers are very, very similar. So, and the other thing that along with that is Klay was 21 and 22 years old as a rookie, and Risacher won't turn 20 until April. So I'm very optimistic about him. I don't know how well it'll translate to category leagues. Like I still think he'll be really good, but I'm not, he might not be a great like defensive stat option, may not be a phenomenal rebounder. I don't think he'll ever be great with assists, but he might be able to do enough here and there along with efficiency for his points and threes to make him a really good category league option. Top 150 and 9 cap value the last 2 weeks. Yeah, I'm very excited. I think I've said this multiple times, said it a lot around the draft. Didn't want the Hawks to draft him, wasn't super high on him, but it's looking very good. So
yeah, I respect you for not being petty and bringing up Stephon Castle numbers. I assume that would be the case. But Stefan's been really good. But yeah, no, a lot of people, a lot of Hawks fans have said, this Rookie of the Year race should not be the formality that a lot of people discuss it to be at this point. And that's fair. As good as Castle has been, no one's really like grabbed the race and taken control of it. Jalen Wells has still been in the mix, even though he doesn't do as much scoring as some of these other guys. He's certainly been a key factor on a playoff-bound team, so he's been in the mix. We've seen Alexander Sarr play better basketball recently too. Like his performance against the Nuggets on Saturday was sensational. I think he had 34 points, or either 34 or 32. It was the best game of his career. So we've seen guys as they get used to the game, the NBA game, their bodies get used to the long seasons. They're closing the season pretty well. I think it's going to make for some exciting choices in terms of either dynasty or redraft drafts next fall.
It's been a better class than a lot of these guys have played better earlier on than I think I was expecting. Like obviously we still have like Reed Shepherd who's shown some flashes here and there, but largely been a disappointing rookie season, mostly because there's just too much competition for minutes. But some of these guys, like I expected Sarr to take a little longer to pan out, but he's had some really good games. He's already starting to be more efficient. I thought it was going to take him potentially multiple seasons. Risacher's been better earlier on. Castle is a great one. Then even like a sleeper like a Jalen Wells, I don't think anybody was expecting him to come and start for a top, I don't even know where they are, at least top 5 team in the West. So
Sarr did score 34 against the Nuggets. Thank you to our producer Adam for that. And then another Hawk who's been really good recently, Onyeka Okongwu. He's ranked 11th Basketball Monster 8 cat over the past 2 weeks. My question: are you buying or selling him as a top 25 player for the rest of the season?
Yeah, when I was going through this list, I was like, shoot, I can't wear my Hawks hat today because I'm going to look too biased. Talking about some of these guys, I was like, let me be a little bit more objective with my hat choice so that I can be less objective while talking about these guys. I wouldn't consider him like a top 25 option for the rest of the season, but I think top 25 in 9 cat is definitely, and 8 cat is definitely attainable. He's actually 3rd in 9 cat over the last 2 weeks because he doesn't have the ball enough to turn it over. So it makes the numbers look even better. But I think the main factor to me is he's been able to play 31.1 minutes per game during that stretch. And for a while there, I think over the course of the season, it's closer to 26. Even when he moved in the starting lineup, he was kind of splitting with Capella, but now Capella's been out for a little bit. So seeing him actually play like typical starters minutes, he's averaged 1.6 steals, 1.4 blocks, 1.1 threes. He's been a little bit, I guess, more confident shooting it. Not necessarily just waiting for ridiculously open looks. Like he's actually been a little bit more of a stretch 5 at times, as opposed to just a guy that can hit them. I think the numbers look better because I think he shoots something like 90-something% from the free throw line. Which, that's not necessarily gonna stick, but that's fine. And then also just double-digit rebounds just because he's playing enough. So this was the thing: is this is the guy that we've said for like 3 or 4 years. This is who he can be in fantasy if the Hawks give him the opportunity. Maybe it didn't make sense at the time, but it finally is making sense for this team for them to do that. And it's been great in fantasy. So yeah, I think top 25 and 8 or 9 cat is definitely something that he can do, even if like you wouldn't actually consider him a top 25 talent.
Yeah, I think it's I'm certainly buying for the rest of this season. I wouldn't put him in that category for like next year. Like you're not going to use a top 25 pick on him, but it certainly shows, like you said, what his potential ceiling can be. And with Capella being a free agent in the summer, I think it's quite clear that that's going to be Onyeka Okongwu's job for the foreseeable future. And that's what a lot of people have wanted. We just fancy basketball or Hawks fans in general. So it's been really good to see him kind of emerge here and show what he's certainly capable of across the board. Let's talk a little bit of golf here. The Valspar Championship. Jordan Spieth and company faced one of the most difficult 3-hole stretches in all of golf this weekend. Catch the PGA's best battle, the Snake Pit at Valspar Championship, live on NBC Golf Channel and streaming on Peacock this weekend. So yeah, if you're not watching basketball the whole weekend, you got a little golf to pay attention to as well. Moving on, the rest of week 20, a lot of these teams are playing 3 games. I think you got 12 teams that only play 2 games the remainder of the week. But amongst these teams, that the 18 that have 3 games, or if anyone else for that matter, are there anybody that you're potentially targeting to add for the rest of the week here, or teams too?
Yeah, I think a couple of, like, you want to play the games a certain way. Obviously, this whole episode will come out Wednesday night, so a lot of leagues can't make their moves at that point. If they're doing like a FA or a free agent bidding system, like, it won't let you make moves until the next morning. So we're just looking at the Thursday through Sunday games. Charlotte is the only team that plays 3 times, and they also have the back-to-back on Thursday and Friday. So you can easily find someone. It's a bunch of dart throws with that team, which makes it a little bit, risky at times. But I mean, DaQuan, Jeffries, Nick Smith Jr. with the Musa Diabate injury, which I don't think there's an official timeline on that, but it didn't look good. Like, Yusuf Nurkic is a guy to consider, especially with the back-to-back. I think Mark Williams would sit one of those. So that's a start out of Nurkic. And then if you want to look at another team, you want to do like a Charlotte on the Thursday, Friday back-to-back. The Hawks are the only team with a back-to-back on Saturday, Sunday. If Karis LeVert's back, I think he's like less than 30% roster in Yahoo leagues. And then so is Zaccharie Risacher, who we just talked about and is playing really well. So if you want to, if you're just trying to like maximize games based on moves, getting someone from Charlotte for that back-to-back, and then getting Risacher, LeVert for that back-to-back, I think it's a good option.
Yeah, I would throw Washington in the mix too. They play Wednesday night, but they have that Friday, Saturday back-to-back. So maybe like a Justin Champagnie, if you're looking for someone to roll the dice on, because Corey Kispert's done for the year. Jordan Poole, he's been upgraded to questionable for Wednesday's game, but you can certainly envision a scenario in which his minutes are either tapered or he's just shut down the stretch here, because they pretty much know what they have with him. We've mentioned Keyshawn George in the past on this show. He's someone else who's below 30% roster too. So those are 2 guys. Utah has 3 games, no back-to-backs. We've already seen more shenanigans with their injury report today. Lauri Markkanen is now out for personal reasons, and Walker Kessler, who was ruled out on Tuesday, is now available. So I think if anything, I would still stick with Kyle Filipowski. He's someone who's about like 34% rostered in Yahoo leagues. He's going to play plenty, whether it's starting or coming off the bench. So he would be someone to go after. If you need assists and defensive stats, Isaiah Collier too.
Utah is interesting because they got fined $100,000, and then kind of like for like a week they were like, we'll play everyone, and then now they're back to messing around. But I've actually been like thinking about what I would rather have happen. A lot of these teams just not playing everyone, like saying, hey, like obviously all these guys are out, we're obviously trying to lose, but they're dealing with these injuries, or what Utah has started to do and what Toronto has done as far as like playing the guys and then either limiting their minutes or just taking them out at the end of the games. Like, I don't know what I'd prefer. I think if I were just like not even like a fantasy or a better, like if I was just going to a game to watch, I would rather them play the starters for 20, 25 minutes and take them out in the fourth quarter, make it clear that they're trying to lose, but I get to see those guys play a little bit. Like, I'd rather, as a viewer, I'd rather watch that. But for fantasy, I'm like, this is the most frustrating thing ever, because one of my friends was texting me about who he should start, and I was like, and he has Lauri Markkanen. I'm like, I don't think you can trust him, because even when he's played, it's been like 25 minutes, and like what his like average game would be considered, like that's probably the best case scenario. So it's just made it more frustrating for fantasy.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what the league can do either, because it's not like you can't tell them in the middle of a game you have to put that guy back on the floor. Like,
they have to control all the rotations for the team. The league has to step in.
I'm not really sure what you do there. Like, I was kind of brainstorming this. Like, maybe you just have like an arbitrary date where you don't stop recording the win-loss records, but that's the point to where you use the records for like draft lottery odds, and don't tell the teams until after the season ends. I doubt that they would agree to this, especially the players union, but I think they're going to have to figure out something, not so much from a fantasy standpoint, but like the quality of product standpoint. You've got people paying good money for these tickets.
Yeah, it's just absolutely embarrassing issue that you like that half the league doesn't care about the second half of the season. Like after the All-Star break, half the teams are basically incentivized to lose. Our producer Adam just dropped in the chat. Look what the Hornets tried out last night. I drove up to that game. I had to go watch that. I mean, like, I was in the nosebleeds. The tickets were stupid cheap, but it was like, the product is like, I was sitting there watching. I'm like, man, I drove 2 hours to watch this game, and LaMelo's just gonna be kind of scratched kind of shortly before the game. It was like annoying, but I don't know. It's the NFL. I was kind of thinking about this. The NFL doesn't have the same issue, even if teams like are obviously tanking because of the shorter regular season. Like if you get hot, like you can go on a run, but with an 82 game season, that doesn't happen. You can't shorten the season enough to where that actually makes sense, because that would be like cutting off over half the season for it to be few enough games for that to make sense. Like, are we at the point with the NBA where we just need to eliminate the draft altogether and then people just enter the league and just sign contracts? Like, just to keep teams competitive. Then there's no reason to lose games. And I don't know if that's something that would actually ever happen, but it would also be interesting to see what kind of contract a guy like a Cooper Flag would get next year. But I don't know. I think that seems to me to be the best solution, even if it'd be such a drastic change for the NBA.
Yeah. The draft is like a smaller conference tournament. Like they shouldn't do it, but the money's too good. For them not to do it. I think that's the problem here. But I think that's a good point. As long as you have a draft lottery and the odds are weighted, this is what you're going to have to deal with.
And even if you don't have a lottery, like these teams are probably just going to tank even harder. Like, I don't know. And I get it, like last week of the regular season, but it's to the point where it's stretching into, I mean, I think even at times in January, but like post All-Star break for sure, teams start going hard, which just, I don't know. It's just an embarrassing issue to have.
Yeah, agreed. Looking forward, fantasy playoffs. If you competed in a league where the playoffs started week 19, week 21 is championship week, semifinal week for 20 through 22. And if you're a sadist and go 21 through 23, that's the first round for you. But looking ahead to week 21 at their schedules, looks like you got a little under half of the teams playing 4 games. There any teams whose schedules kind of stick out to you for week 21?
Let me pull up the schedule.
Yeah, I would say
first.
I do actually. I think Philadelphia and San Antonio, they both have Saturday, Sunday back-to-backs to end week 21. So if you're playing catch up, those are 2 teams to look at, especially for your low rostered guys. San Antonio, Philly, those aren't going to be play-in or playoff teams this year. So we may see some guys emerge down in those respective places. Obviously, Stephon Castle is going to be off the board in most standard leagues, but maybe you can get some value out of a Julian Champagnie in San Antonio for one. In Philadelphia, we've already discussed some of their low rostered guys already.
Yeah, I think at first glance, it's also just like a very balanced week.
Yeah.
There's no super light days. I guess the lightest, I think, is Wednesday, which is a
Wednesday 6. Yep.
And to me, it's like you're probably not getting a massive advantage from having the teams on those days. So nothing too sticks out to me too much at this point. I mean, I guess maybe some of the teams that have back-to-backs, kind of looking at those as far as who's going to end up missing games. Like, for example, Utah has a back-to-back. Washington has a back-to-back. It's like, how many players are they going to be able to sit out, and who does that open up minutes for? I think those are probably the main factors I'd be looking at right now.
Yeah, and I think in terms of back-to-backs, the Clippers don't play one until that Sunday, Monday, going into week 22. Unfortunate thing about their schedule, their first game isn't until Wednesday against the Knicks, but Kawhi Leonard has really come on recently. So if you have him rostered, the absence of back-to-backs is really good for fantasy managers who have him at this point. Yeah, and obviously, with the playoffs coming, it's starting to get warmer outside. Never too early to look ahead to the summer. And with that in mind, you got the Premier League Summer Series. This summer is your chance to catch the Premier League in the United States. Manchester United, Bournemouth, Everton and West Ham take the pitch across the country. For more information and to purchase tickets, visit PremierLeague.com/Summer Series. And now we get into a part of the show we don't do every week, but it's kind of fun to discuss. So rest of the season player battles in terms of fantasy values, who you'd prefer to have rostered for the rest of the season. I think the first choices will go with two really high-ranked point guards right now, Tyrese Haliburton, Luka Doncic. Which one would you prefer to have rostered for the rest of the season and why?
Yeah, I think both those guys have been playing incredibly well. I'm going to lean Haliburton. Both guys have been dealing with injuries. Don't feel confident that they're going to be available for back-to-backs, but the Lakers have an extra back-to-back over the next 3 weeks. I'm not even going to look at the final week just because, please don't do that if you're playing fantasy. just please don't. But this is an extra opportunity for Luka to miss a game. I think Haliburton has been one of the best players in fantasy since the All-Star break, and Luka has had some awesome games, but also his fair share of efficiency issues and kind of working back from a lengthy absence and trying to fit in with the new team. So I'm going to lean Haliburton. I feel a little safer with Haliburton.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. The efficiency, and then eventually LeBron's going to be back too. So that's going to siphon away a small piece of Luka's usage. Nothing too major, but when you're having the occasional shooting issues like he has recently, I think it's 5 for 20 from the field the other night. So yeah, I'm going to go with Tyrese as well. The next one, this is interesting. Desmond Bane or Trae Young?
I think specifically for 8-cat, I'm going to go Trae Young. I think if turnovers are a factor, obviously Trae Young, I think, leads the league in turnovers still. I mean, I know Cade and James Harden are close as well, but I think the fact that it's 8-cat, I would lean Trae. I think they have the same amount of games played as well. And Trae's going to, even if he's going to have his inconsistent efficiency nights, he has the same role every night, whereas Desmond Bane has played really well with John Moran out, but sometimes his role fluctuates a little bit. Sometimes they lean a little bit more on Jaren Jackson. So Bane's been fantastic, but I think I trust Trae Young a little bit more.
Yeah, I think the John Morant factor is kind of what has Bane in this conversation. If all things were equal, I would certainly go with Trae Young as well, especially in an 8-cat format, just because he's going to be the centerpiece offensively. Bane with no John Morant, I think he just got Jaren Jackson Jr. back too, so that's kind of boosted his value recently. So yeah, I would go with Trae Young as well. The last one, Kawhi Leonard or Anthony Edwards?
I think the fact that it's a conversation is cool because it's been a rough, however long it's been for Kawhi, where he's just been in and out of the lineup with injuries. It feels like forever now. But the fact that he's playing really well, I think it deserves a conversation is cool. But the Clippers have an extra game over the next few weeks, but they also have 2 back-to-backs, which basically means once you do the math, one less game. Yeah, so one less game for Kawhi. 100% that's what they should do. They shouldn't ramp him up to play back-to-backs this close to the postseason because you want him healthy. They can get one good postseason with Kawhi Leonard healthy. I think the only time it's happened wasn't it the bubble when they blew the 3-1 lead against Denver? I think every other year it's either been him or Paul George that got hurt.
Yeah.
So I think it should give you confidence that this is even a conversation if you have Kawhi. But I'm going to go with Anthony Edwards just because we know he's going to be out there on the floor, barring some other injuries. I think it's kind of an asterisk for everything. Of course, players can get hurt this time of year, but I trust Anthony Edwards a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Like you said, the fact that we're even having this conversation, that says a lot about how much Kawhi has progressed, since getting healthy. So, plus they don't play back-to-backs in the playoffs. So there's really no reason for him to do it this close, to the end of the regular season. So, yeah, I think Anthony Edwards having that potential to play one more game, if you assume that Kawhi is not going to play both ends of back-to-backs. So, yeah, I would go Ant as well. The field goal percentage can be a bit sketchy at times just because he fires up so many three-pointers, but you're still going to get the points and everything else that comes with Anthony Edwards. So I'm not too worried about that. So I would take him. but it's pretty close too. So, obviously NCAA tournament, you being the dynasty person that you are, I'm sure you may have a more trained eye on this than people who are more in the redraft leagues. But, we hear a lot about Cooper Flagg. Obviously, Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper will not be playing in the NCAA tournament. But beyond Cooper Flagg, are there any guys that you're kind of watching for dynasty purposes that you think that other dynasty managers should be keeping an eye on these next couple weeks?
Yeah, there's quite a few. I think it's exciting to see some of these guys playing on really good teams in the tournament, seeing how they perform on a bigger stage. And also sometimes against smaller schools that have players that are 23, 24 years old, because it's closer to what they'll see with NBA competition. I think if I can just highlight an actual matchup in the first round, Jeremiah Fears from Oklahoma versus Liam McNeely from UConn. It's an 8-9 matchup, and the winner would end up playing Florida, which is another really good team. Jeremiah Fears is a guy that I'm getting more and more excited about. I think he could potentially be a top 5 talent, or one of those guys that when we look at redrafts in 3 years, it's like, why was Jeremiah Fears not going significantly earlier than he was? And he's a really fun offensive talent. And obviously I'm not saying that's going to be the head-to-head matchup, but I think seeing a talent like Jeremiah Fears and then going up against an experienced like coach in Dan Hurley at UConn, Rav, I think you're a UConn fan. I'm saying that right now. And I'd like, how do you feel about seeing that matchup or having Liam McNeely there?
I think it's going to be fun. McNeely, he got hurt and missed a lot of time during the season, ankle injury. UConn's defense, especially on the perimeter, hasn't always been great this season. So that gives a potential for a breakout. I wouldn't say breakout performance for Jeremiah Fears. So we certainly know what he can do, but this could be a big game for him offensively. McNeely, they play him on the ball and play him off the ball as well. I think his offensive versatility is something that a lot of, the draft scouts and whatnot are going to want to see on this stage. And he's someone that can also be a top 10 caliber pick this summer. So both of those guys, that's certainly going to be a fun matchup. No disrespect to either of the 16 seeds that Florida could potentially play, but we're expecting the Gators to play either UConn or Oklahoma in round 2. So that'll be more of a challenge for both of those freshmen for sure. I'll throw another freshman into the mix here. VJ Edgecombe out of Baylor. I think he's one of the best athletes in college basketball, regardless of class. The question is, what's he going to be at the next level? I've seen some people say he could be like a 3-and-D type player. Can he be someone who has the ball in his hands more? You don't want to take too much from an NCAA tournament setting, because you're probably looking at 1 to 6 games. That's all you're going to get from these guys. But what you think about VJ Edgecombe, because I think he can be a really exciting prospect at the next level.
Yeah, and I think I'm really hoping that they win their first round matchup. I believe it's against Mississippi State, because they would be in line to play Duke second round. So seeing VJ Edgecombe against, we mentioned Cooper Flagg, Con Knuppel, and Kamen Malach. I think obviously it's not a bunch of head-to-head matchups there, but seeing all of those potential top 10 picks on the court at the same time, I think we're going to see quite a few matchups, or at least I'm hoping we'll see quite a few matchups with these potential top 10 talents just going head-to-head and just competing at a high level on a national stage. I think it'll give us a good idea of who can rise to the occasion.
Right. Yeah, it's a good point. Another freshman, Kasparas Jakusionis out of Illinois. He's had some turnover issues, especially in Big Ten play, but the versatility is something I think really sticks out for people who've been following him. He's another freshman who could potentially be a lottery pick in the summer.
Definitely. He's an exciting one, and he'll have a chance to potentially play another guy that can go in the top 10. And Trey Johnson, Texas plays Xavier tonight. So if you want to start your scouting immediately, seeing how he looks in this play-in matchup to potentially play Illinois in the first round, that could be another top 10 matchup there. So it's like I said, a lot of these will be a lot of fun. A couple other guys that I'm looking at, Danny Wolf from Michigan. I think I just like him as a prospect, a 7-footer that can shoot, that can pass, play defense. Wanting to see what he can do on this big stage. Asa Newell from Georgia, playing against an experienced, older Gonzaga team that has some really good bigs. Seeing how he performs, and also kind of interested to see how he could potentially fit into an NBA roster, because he's kind of an interesting fit at the 4, but does a little bit more in the post, but can space the floor. And then some other talented guys like a Derek Queen from Maryland.
Yeah. Yep.
Was one guy I think you were going to highlight as well. And then Jace Richardson from Michigan State, because they could go really far in the tournament. You don't bet against Izzo in March, is what they say. So seeing him potentially in like a Elite Eight Final Four matchup, definitely worth keeping an eye on. One more guy, and then I'll let you take over here. But I believe the pronunciation is Igor Demon. I apologize if that's wrong. Okay, cool. Igor Demon. BYU, he was expected to go top 10 preseason, but he hasn't looked great this year. I think it's a good opportunity for him on a national stage to kind of flip the script a little bit. If he has a couple big games, I don't know, could do numbers for his draft prospect.
Yeah. Queen was certainly someone that I've got my eye on this tournament. Offensively, he's an immensely gifted big. I think the defensive end of the floor is where people have questions, especially you get him involved in a two-man game. The college and pro games are so much different from a defensive standpoint. You can play zones. You don't have illegal defense. So we'll see what he can do there. I think it's going to be about just as much about conditioning and improving the lateral athleticism as anything for him. And that's something you probably do during the summer, but he's certainly going to be a lottery pick. And then I'll throw this matchup out there, probably my favorite individual matchup of the first round. Cam Jones and Marquette versus Donovan Dent of New Mexico. I love Cam Jones. He certainly got his pub playing in the Big East, but I don't know if the nation is as familiar with Donovan Dent as they probably should be. Mountain West Player of the Year, outstanding guard. So if you have limited time to watch these tournament games, that's going to be one game. It's part of that first night session on Friday, the early night game. So that's going to be a game you certainly want to carve out a little time to watch, because those two going at each other should definitely be fun to watch. Any final thoughts from you?
Man, I think we hit on a lot of different guys. So I think the only other guys that I'm super excited to see how they fall into the draft are guys that are either international players or didn't make the tournament. Like example, Rutgers duo and Collie Murray Boyles from South Carolina. So but it's going to be a really good class and a lot more exciting already than last year's class was. So it'll be exciting to see how these guys perform.
One last guy, Milos Uzan from Houston. Their junior point guard, really talented player, had a really good Big 12 tournament. So he's on a 1 seed. Couple weeks we could see him in San Antonio. So who knows? But that'll do it for us today. A lot of fun. Thanks as always to Noah Rubin and our producer Adam in the background. I'm Raphielle Johnson. We will talk to you next Wednesday.